Okay, so a few things I want to talk about. We are going to discuss the market research white paper, which is a major project for this class other than the 2 exams. We're going to talk about, with those guidelines, which is a template for how you have to do the analysis, we're going to talk about a good, simple way to analyze demand in a market, and then a good, simple way to analyze supply in a market. And so don't confuse supply with the raw materials that are going into making a product. It's supply from the perspective of a market. So you have the firms that represent supply. That would be your competition. If you're going into a market, you are becoming part of supply, right? You are a firm competing for the consumer's business. So you look at demand one way, you look at supply another way. You want to have a good understanding of when you join a market, enter a market, you're going to be competing. You have to have a good idea of who you would be competing with. And then you'll also want to have an idea of who maybe in the market right now isn't that much into your specific part of the market that you're coming into, but could they be a threat? Could they move over into that market fairly easily? And if it's something that could be a significantly profitable enterprise, might other firms already in the market adapt a little bit, adjust, and start to offer the similar product or service and kind of compete with you? And you have to be able to think about the firms in a way that, how big of a threat is that? And it really depends on what the industry is, what the product or service is, how fast could they adjust to that type of thing. And so, understanding kind of the mechanism of production, that's either a service or a good, in the market. So how easy would it be to adapt, to recognize when something is coming to the market, kind of disrupted things, right? So that you can figure out kind of get an idea of what it's going to be like when you come into the market to compete, right? All right. Before I get into that, though, I want to make sure you guys are aware we're having it's currently called a business plan competition, or it has been called a business plan competition at Coastal. We're changing it. For this year, it's going to be called a pitch competition. So basically, you make your pitch of your proposed idea, and you have, basically on the day that the thing actually takes place, imagine you have like 60 seconds or less to, and I sent you guys a link, right? Now, did anybody see the link that I sent before spring break? I sent a link of a pitch competition taking place at, I don't remember what university it was, but you basically had these individuals in it looked like they were in a classroom, and there was, a few of them, I don't know how many, and they each got basically 60 seconds to give their pitch. And you could see there was all different levels of ideas. There were really simple ideas to really involved ideas, right? Just depending. And the pitches are kind of judged by, usually it's local entrepreneurs, something like that. And the idea is they're actually looking for some ideas that they'd be interested in actually maybe helping getting behind, maybe fund them, maybe offer some mentoring, something like that. Or maybe the people that brought the idea might have something to offer a company, maybe not with that exact idea, but it becomes apparent that they're thinking about something that, it could be like an interview, right? It could be like a job interview in a very unique way, right? So you're presenting an idea for something you've thought of, and it might be that maybe the timetable that's pretty long term, but in the short run, there's a lot of stuff that you could do for a company that might be involved in this pitch competition. They bring you in as an employee, and particularly you have to have the mindset, understanding it's an entrepreneurial type organization, right? A small organization, most likely, and you will kind of develop through that company, and then maybe eventually your actual idea might get some time to be tested, that type of thing, right? So, and it just differs all over the country in terms of pitch competitions, how they're run. So we're going to that model here, and the way we're doing it is we're partnering with a firm, and that firm is Co-Work NYR, so they're going to be a co-sponsor on our competition. And they have a place down in Myrtle Beach. Their technology is their focus, technology startups, but they have people that work in there already that are, don't have anything to do with technology, but they might need a website, right? They might need that type of thing, and people just work in there. So they work in there, they have a membership, they use the space, they have access to, internet, phones, conference rooms, whatever it might be. They even have a 3D printer in the space that if you have a product idea and you get somebody to do drawings for you that are CAD drawings and you'd like to have a prototype of it, you can just make have you guys heard of the 3D printer, like how it works? Basically, with plastics, it'll sit there and build the prototype, right? And it'll be everything will look appropriate, right? And that's a model. So they've got one of those down there, which is pretty neat to be able to have access to that type of thing. But anyway, so that's so the pitch competition. We should be doing the call for pitches. The pitch call tomorrow is the release of it, and we'll be putting flyers all over campus. We'll have I think there's a YouTube link. There should be Facebook, all that kind of stuff that will have information about it. And basically, you'll have a certain amount of time. It's early April. You send an abstract. Abstract would say 250 words or less about your idea. To say basically, I would like to enter to compete in the pitch competition. So 250 words that describes your thing. That is a first review once all of those go in, and we have no idea how many would be accepted at this point because it's the first time we've done it this way. But if it goes on to the next round then is the actual live pitch competition where you, more than just that 250 word abstract, the idea is you've been continuing to work on it. And you try to sell it, 60 seconds or less, you try to sell somebody on the idea. And that's the whole thing. So in here, the hope is that, some of you, especially if we're going to work in groups, you enter your idea in the pitch competition. It's a good experience just to get in front of a small audience and talk about something that you worked on and try to sell that idea, right? 60 seconds or less, boom. And the process of awards, what you would get is, the biggest thing is you would get space down at Co-work NYR if you're one of the first, second, or third place, I think it is. You would have about the equivalent of a semester of time working down at Co-work NYR. That would basically be your office, right? And you would just come in there just like any other place. If you're a student that doesn't graduate, then it becomes a course in the next semester that you get credit for, and it's kind of like an internship arrangement. It's just like a practicum credit for an elective, right? And so particularly in right now in business management, it would be an entrepreneurship type credit for the track in entrepreneurship. So that same time you would be down there, it would be for that. You could get credit for that, for doing that type of thing. So hopefully tomorrow that'll go as planned, and we'll have that advertised all over campus, and we'll start getting submissions for that. So let's go right now first to the guidelines for the market research white paper. All right. So the purpose of it, this is just coming from, as I'm reading this is this handout that I gave you. This white paper is your platform and opportunity to put your idea on paper and examine it within the context of the market and competitive arena that you would be entering, laying the groundwork for your enterprise to successfully launch. Key questions you'll consider would include what is the nature and composition of the current producers of similar products or services who could offer, or companies that could offer these? How do you perceive demand for similar products or services? What are the characteristics of the producers and consumers in the market? Is a local market large enough, or will you have to broaden your market geographically or otherwise? How will your enterprise look in its earliest stages, and how would it evolve? So in a market analysis, you're not only looking at the market that's out there, You're looking at your own enterprise, how does it fit into it, and how is it going to look when it goes into the marketplace, and how will that change over time as it's in the marketplace competing, right? So, the things that you have to address, this market paper is about 8 to 10 pages, single space, 12 font. That's about the length that would be appropriate to get out everything that you have to get out. It could certainly be longer. Some of you, might have difficulty getting it even that long if your idea is really simple and you can't think about how much, but you have to really give that some thought, right? Do you know everything? So more than likely, if you can't get it longer, it's because you haven't given it as much thought as it actually warrants, right? So you need to have an executive summary, about a page, and that's generally so you can think of your 60-second pitch as being based pretty much on your executive summary, right? You get an executive summary down on a page, and in 60 seconds, you don't spell out the executive summary, but if an executive summary that's boiled down to one page that's effective, somebody can read that one page and they know right away what this is, what the market is, if this is the individual or enterprise that could actually be successful in bringing this thing to the market and be successful in that. So it should convey all that in the executive summary. And that's the same thing your pitch should do in 60 seconds or less, right? And then you go into the body of the thing, you introduce it, the typical introduction that sets up the remainder of the paper. And the first part of the paper is what we call the enterprise proposition. And this comes out of Gerber. All right, so the Gerber Awakening the Entrepreneur Within book, he's got an example of a white paper, right? And it takes up several chapters in that book. And just look at, and his idea is, I think the example he uses is a small business consulting firm that's based on a franchise model like McDonald's, right? And so you can have this small business consulting firm that helps entrepreneurs start a company all over the country, and you would employ people that really don't need that much training or knowledge in starting a business themselves, but they follow a template, right, and procedure, check-off sheet, whatever it might be. Just like at McDonald's, the people who make the hamburgers every single day the same exact way, they're not certified chefs, right? And the reason that they're made the exact same way, that the Egg McMuffin is made the exact same way every single day, is not that all the people are trained so well that they're all experts in cooking. It's that the process is so defined that you almost cannot mess it up, right? And so in an industry where you deal with heavy turnover, you can substitute people in and out on the line pretty easily and get this thing done, right? You teach them a few things, even though to a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, getting in there and starting on that day could be mind-boggling, right? Because you might have 11 employees and there's all this stuff going on. And when you step back and think about it, a little bit of instruction. So the managers that's a different level, right? They even have McDonald's University. You go and you learn training for managing that type of organization. But the idea is your system. So the Awakening the Entrepreneur Within book is all about systems, just like management is about systems. Market-based management is about systems. What kind of systems can you put in place that help you eliminate places where the abstract or the unknown can really trip up the organization and just not have a way to deal with something that wasn't foreseen, right? Okay, so the enterprise proposition is broken down into 4 things. The first is the dream, the second is the purpose, the third is the vision, and the fourth is the mission. Each of those is a separate chapter in Awakening the Entrepreneur Within. And at the end of each chapter, it has kind of a stop and think thing about what is the dream, what is the vision, what is the purpose, what is the mission. And these are terms that we're all familiar with, except maybe the dream. You don't see those on annual reports very often. The dream, right? So the difference here is the idea that entrepreneurship, more than just having a mission statement or something like that, you're creating something that doesn't exist. It's got to be very personal to you, right? But it's also got to really benefit the customer, right? Because they've got to be drawn to pay money to actually adopt this thing and use it, right? And so it's got to be something, since you're basically bringing something that doesn't exist, or that doesn't exist in this place, or whatever, or for this company it's new, maybe a lot of other companies are doing this, but your company isn't. You've got to change the whole paradigm and bring this thing. So it's really got to be, you yourself have to have buy-in, right? You have to be bought into this. And that's why the dream is a part of this, that this is kind of your own personal story, that part of it, right? How do you fit into this? Why have you chosen to take this thing and try to bring it to fruition, right? Then, once that is established to yourself and to the audience for this, what is the purpose of this thing? What is the purpose of this enterprise? What is the vision for it? How will it be fulfilled? And basically, what is your mission as an organization or an enterprise to turn this vision into reality, right? Okay, so that part, that first half of this page is, we haven't even really gotten into the nuts and bolts of market analysis, right? And in fact, some of it you would probably write before you do that. Some of it you would go back afterward, maybe adjust a little bit, as you might have a more in-depth understanding of the market and say, oh, actually, our mission, we're going to differentiate ourselves in a certain way, right? And the mission needs to reflect that, whatever. Okay, now let's look at demand. So the way that we try to do it in this course is we keep an economic perspective, which simplifies it. We simply look at basic supply and demand in a market, and we see what are the aspects of the consumer, for example, if we're looking at demand, and can we in some way measure the magnitude of this? So if you look at, you want to focus on your typical consumer, and this section of the research paper is 2 to 3 pages. Describe your typical consumer. Do you perceive various consumer groups? Are there different, completely different types of consumers for your product that they're going to look at it in a really different way, right? Even though it's the same exact product. Will you target business users, recreational users, or a mix? And as, for example, since we started this session, this period, talking about Apple versus the PC, what did Apple do in the beginning that differentiated themselves from the PC? Who was their target market? And who has it been for the past, even this last decade? Someone who uses an Apple versus someone who uses a PC, what is the difference in those people?
They're not corporate. They're not.
Okay, Apple is not corporate customers, right? They haven't been, right? Corporate customers for Apple today might be Google, right? It might be the technology companies, but traditionally, Apples are not sold to corporations. Who's got the market on corporations?
Windows.
What's that?
Windows.
The Windows-based PCs, right? Which is Dell, IBM, HP, the PC market. So Apple, in their earliest stages, they made a conscious decision to go after a different type of consumer, right? Who knows what the main reasons were for that, but they certainly separated it out, and that legacy stuck with Apple for, it's really just now even becoming a question of, would a company use a PC or would they use Apple, right? But for the longest time, it wasn't even debatable. I mean, a corporation used a PC, period. All right. So that's the end user in that way. What about the individuals that use Apple versus the individuals that use PCs then? What's different about it? What has been different about them? How many of you in here use Apples? Mac?
Younger.
What's that?
You're younger.
Okay, you're younger. Who else uses a Mac? Okay. Everyone else uses PCs. That's interesting. All right.
Generally, creatives, designs, formats, anything, photo editing, imaging, things of that nature.
Okay. Yeah, Apple is known for, why do you use an Apple?
Well, I thought you were referring to, are you talking about phones or computers?
No, computers.
Well, I use it on Windows.
Oh, so, okay, so you don't use Apple for your computer, okay.
Well, my desktop at home is an Apple.
Okay.
My father got.
Your father got it?
Yeah.
All right, why did he choose an Apple?
He said it's more intuitive.
Okay, more intuitive.
Which means, I mean, like, it's like, you don't really have to, like, you don't know, you can do something, but you don't really know why you're doing it. It's just automatically does it for you kind of thing.
Okay, so he's an Apple type person, then,
Yeah.
right? It clicks with him.
Yeah.
All right. Did anybody else say they use an Apple? Okay, why do you use it?
I think I like to use Apple because it's you find you start using it, you get used to it, and like you just don't want to go back to Windows because it just runs better.
Okay, so the Apple, for whatever reasons that I've heard, is to write a virus for Apple. It's just not going to be as effective as for a PC. It's pretty sinister, but you know, if you really want to mess up a lot of people's day, use a PC because more people use a PC, right? And so you're going to mess up a lot more people's day than if you targeted the Apple thing, right? That's the example I've heard over and over and over. The reason that Apple is not targeted. That could certainly change if Apple gets 50% of the market. It'd be a toss-up. Which one would you rather affect, right? I mean, if half the population is using either one, the Apple then probably becomes pretty vulnerable to viruses.
I think the operating system runs better though.
Okay.
So, I mean, I remember I think it was a sophomore in high school, I got a Dell, and within 3 hours of me having it, I got a blue screen.
Really?
And, yeah, and I was like, this is crazy. I called up Dell, and they were telling me how to reboot the computer and everything. I was like, but that's bad for your computer. I'm having to do this within the first day of having it.
Right.
I just put it back in the box, sent it back.
Oh, yeah.
Pulled it
Yeah.
back on.
Yeah, okay. All right, interesting. So, Apple has built a reputation that it doesn't have the problems that PCs have, for sure. PCs, another thing, what is different about now, so that's the consumer's perspective. It obviously didn't start that way in the beginning, but what would be different from a consumer's perspective and from a company? How would Apple make sure that their operating system is just more reliable versus a PC? What's different about, who makes the operating system for a PC?
Intel.
Well, Intel is what? That's the processor, right? What's the operating system? What is it?
Windows,
Windows. Who makes Windows?
Microsoft.
Microsoft. Does Microsoft make computers?
No.
No. Okay, so in terms of production, you're dealing with having to integrate the software with the hardware. What happens with Apple?
No middleman, they do both of them.
They make them both, right? And again, if you read Steve Jobs' biography, he really believes that if that ever changes, the quality of Apple will go down. There are too many things that can go wrong when you bring together the software with the hardware that he doesn't want to have to wonder if it's going to work right, if it's going to be reliable. And then if you have a problem, who fixes if you call Dell and it was a software issue, that's kind of odd when you think about it, right? So you had to reboot. It probably wasn't the hardware, but it was probably a software problem that is not working right for some reason, but you call Dell. That's just the way it is, right? But maybe it should be, we have a way to call Microsoft, right? I don't even know if maybe there is that way to do that, but your first thought is you call whoever made the computer and they walk you through that, right? So they might have trained software experts, Windows certified technicians that helped you with that whole thing, but they didn't actually make it, right? So that's a little bit different too. Those are issues. All right. When you target business users, recreational or a mix, the big difference between a business customer and a recreational customer, right? Distribution channels, the mindset, the money that's allocated for it, just all different kinds of issues there. How much do typical users use the product or service? How do typical users use the product or service? Those are all things that you have to know about, right? You really have to think about that, and it affects your business. Describe how various factors of demand affect your market and your approach. Is your market, potential market local, regional, national, international, and why might that be the case, right? Okay, so let's stop there for a second. That's all aspects of demand. And, you know, I think it's pretty self-explanatory to see what you would have to do in your market research to start understanding that and why that's important. That's just half of it, right? Your typical competitor is the other side. But how would you, you know, the way you go about getting information is you really have to start getting an understanding of the consumer. And it's more than just going in and getting market data from the census about, you know, you could use population, income, employment information, demographics, male, female, percentage, age, all these different things. You could get that information, but you haven't demonstrated a real up close and personal understanding of your typical consumer with just that information, right? So, you know, how would you go about understanding that consumer more? How would you?
I guess for the example, the project in regards to people doing their home ec, learning it on their own, you have to, you know, engage some real live, you know, people that work in that field. You have to engage some mechanics. You have to ask some repairmen, some people that do that for a living, whose craft that is on a daily basis.
Right, right.
I mean, that's what I would imagine. They have to give you an idea on the local level. I mean, how much competition do they have? What kind of customer are they frequently helping most often?
Right, right.
Things of that nature. What's their busiest part of the year and stuff like that.
Right, sure, yeah. So, I mean, you go and talk to a few mechanics or shop managers just in town and ask them about, or you sit in their shop, right?
Yeah.
You go in there and just sit for an hour and watch the type of people that come in and the type of problems that they have and the type of questions that they ask, and you start to build an understanding of that consumer, right? And how that shop approaches the consumer. You can also, today, you can get some real in-depth insight into the way that, say for, in that example, the mechanics or carpenters or whatever, because we have blogs that are dedicated to a trade, right? And you can, an interesting thing was actually when the BP oil spill happened in New Orleans, I forget the name of the rig that actually, I cannot remember the name of it. I was thinking Discovery, was it? Yeah, but so anyway, that rig, the drillers, the operators of that rig, they have an organization, right? And they all belong to this trade group, right? Whether it's, I think it was unionized, I don't recall, but it was at least a trade organization, and it's a very specialized skill if you're a driller on a rig, right? And I read a blog that was devoted to that trade, and it had conversation going back and forth, because I had a curiosity about what happened there. And there was dialogue going back and forth for several days right after it happened about several of the people on blogging on there were on the rig, right? And they gave their account of what happened. And they were talking about the bolts that gave way. And right away, they said, you know, for a bolt the size of a paint can, right? And immediately I started thinking about that. My God, it is a bolt the size of a paint can. You know, it's a large, or a nut, actually, not the bolt, but the nut, size of a paint can. And they started describing the whole, you know, technical description of the rig, the apparatus that was involved, all those different things. And they were talking about basically the life on the job and the things that would happen at any given time, the environment there, and you really got, just from reading their blog, way more than you would ever get from a newspaper reporter's, you know, 3-page story. You have from interviewing one person, and then you only get, you know, that perspective from it. But so you can go on the blogs these days. Mechanics blogs are interesting. The mechanics will ask the question, has anybody dealt with this type of problem on this type of unit? You have 10 people answer back and say, this is the This is how I dealt with that type of thing. And they'll say, a customer will usually say this, and this is happening. You just see all kinds of stuff like that, just from blogs online that are specifically devoted to a specific thing, right? So you could survey blogs. There's all kinds of information that you could get. You could even log in as somebody on the blog and say, I'm actually looking at starting a business. You could say what kind of business it is, whatever you want, and just say, I'd be curious your perspective, and then just see if people answer you back. You might get, who knows what, right? What kind of response. But that's something you can do today that you just couldn't do 10, 15, 20 years ago for sure, right? Okay, so there's all different ways. There's basic analysis, which would be, demographic statistics, those types of things, socioeconomic information. But then the in-depth, first-hand knowledge brings a whole other level to the understanding. All right, so that's demand. Supply, your typical competitor. Okay, so similar way that demand is broken down, supply, now we're looking at typical competitor. So who do you perceive to be your competitors? And or who might potential consumers buy from instead of you? All right? Describe the perceived competitors. Are these large companies? Are these corporations? Are they franchises of corporations? What are they like? And that gives you an idea of how well capitalized are they? I mean, if this is a large corporation that has franchises all over the company, all over the country, and you're going to be competing against them, what do they bring to the table that you would have a real difficulty bringing? Think about even marketing dollars. Suppose it was an oil change business, and you're going to compete against Jiffy Lube, right? You might say, well, I'm better at changing oil, and I can get people in here that are better at it than the people at Jiffy Lube. But you've got to convince people that would be the case, right? And you're going to have to market yourself. Jiffy Lube's a household name now, right? So, how easy would it be for you to compete against Jiffy Lube when they're bringing the radio ads, the TV ads, the magazine ads, newspaper ads, their signs are recognizable. Just competing against that would be difficult. Even though you might say, this Jiffy Lube in my neighborhood, or that Jiffy Lube, or whatever, I know I can do it better, right? But the typical consumer might not perceive that, and it might not be that big of a deal to the typical consumer. You even have to ask that question, right? What would be the marginal benefit to a consumer to break away from that, go to this other place? How long would it take you to establish a localized reputation where they would say, I don't go to Jiffy Lube, we go to this neighborhood place, but how long would it take you to build that, right, that customer base competing against Jiffy Lube? All right, let's see. Is there heavy competition or just a few? Are your competitors, we've kind of gone into this local, regional, national, international, and then do a SWOT analysis. Just break it out, list your various competitors, and then think about what is unique about the different competitors, right? And if we were going to use an example of, say, Jiffy Lube would also compete with the shops at the dealerships, right? There's something different about those two things. The consumer that goes to those is different. And what makes that different, right? And then you start to build an understanding of that, but you have to think about it, right? You really have to think about that and see, why are there these two different types of shops? They both generate revenue, but what is different about them, right? And what is important about that difference for your enterprise idea? Okay? After you've done all that, do you see an obvious hole in the market or a niche, right? And what does that mean? To say that there's a hole in the market, right?
A demand is not being met.
Yeah, there's a demand for something that's not being met, okay? It's either that you perceive it. You can go back to Steve Jobs' example and say, maybe the market doesn't know that there's a niche there that's not being fulfilled, but the people don't know it yet, right? Because it might be so unique that it just doesn't even exist and nobody's even perceived this type of thing. You may have perceived it. You might look at this and you see how unique it is, and it's something that you feel if you bring it to the market, it is going to be accepted The question is, how long will it take to get it accepted, right? It's not going to be immediate, most likely. So, but if you have to really, hopefully, that is something that you can define. If you can't define a niche in the market, what is most likely the case for your enterprise that you've chosen?
You could dig something else.
Huh?
Might want to look elsewhere.
Well, I mean, why would it maybe be the case that, say you've done a lot of research and there just is no niche that you see? What would be the reason? Why would that be the case?
Sarah, is that one?
But I mean, why would there not be one?
Maybe your product is too broad.
Okay, maybe it's too broad, and if it's really broad, then that means it's a really competitive market, right? So the competition that's out there, they're able to meet this, right? And if your thing is so broad, now that doesn't mean that the idea is done. Maybe it just means you haven't brought it far enough, right? So if it's that broad that all these different types of companies that are completely different can pretty much meet the broad description of this thing, well then maybe if you refine your idea and narrow it and define it better, then maybe the niche is recognized, right? Yeah.
Maybe it's not just like a niche product, like it gives your product that niche. What if it's like you have like a niche age group? Like,
Okay.
Like maybe one product would appeal more to like teens, and then one product would appeal more to like an older age group. Could you still consider that a niche?
Yeah, give an example. I mean, just,
Well, the headphones idea that I was going to do.
okay.
You have like Beats that kind of pushes more to a younger age, like high school, college. You have other things like Sony that pushes more to a studio age, which would be older from the 30s to, or maybe even 35s to 50s.
Right.
But you don't have a lot of headphones that meet that professional kind of age group where you're kind of going from like your 22s or 23s to like your 35s.
Okay, now, so to say, if there's a niche there, okay, in that middle ground, describe that group, that age group. Let's think about it.
Or either graduating from college or trying to get in the workforce.
Okay, so you've got
Or already
Beats.
established.
All right, what you have to do is literally think, what is unique about them that says the Beats are going to be less and less of interest to them, right? That one's kind of easy from my perspective, maybe because I'm older, and then I know that when I see someone walking through an airport or anywhere wearing those, my assumption is
That's a child.
they are young.
Exactly.
They're not working professional, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, what word did you use?
That's a child. He's not.
Yeah, a child, right.
Coming to work with Beats.
Yeah, you're not walking into a professional position
Right.
somewhere wearing Beats, right? You're just not. Not in mainstream. Now, if you work in LA in a studio, I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably normal, right?
Right.
But it's not normal in an
New York
insurance
City.
office. In,
Yeah, like
yeah,
New York City.
yeah, even there in in Manhattan or in
Right.
an office building, that's not going to be normal. That's going to be social norms are important, right? If your product doesn't adhere to social norms, you're going to have difficulty bringing that to. I mean, sometimes it might not be difficult. The thing about the what was that weird blanket with the hood? The Snuggie, right? But social norms, who cares? It's in the comfort of your own home,
Yeah.
right? So you order it, nobody knows about it. You don't tell people you have a Snuggie, right? Right? You got one, and everybody's got a Snuggie, right? I really don't have a Snuggie. But anyway, if you did, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's not that big of a risk to have one because you don't wear them down the street, right? So not a big deal, right? But so let's say now, okay, we say, all right, the Beats do not work for this group that you want to target. But the question is then, do the other ones work for this group that you want to target? What are the other ones?
You can do like more professional groups, like Sony. They do some products that are more high end to like older groups, but they do have like maybe a little bit of products like the professional headphones that are kind of more toned, like in color, just color wise.
Mhm.
You have a new company, Vimoda. They came out with they're more like DJ, but they're still very tone and color, which can also appeal to like professional groups.
Okay.
You have some that are like a lot of like professional people buy like earbuds
Mhm.
instead of like over-ear headphones.
Right.
So you have those, like Skull Candy comes out with some products, but they're like solid black or stuff like that.
Okay.
You need like toner colors and more of a sleeker design.
When you say toner color, what do you
Like red, white,
Oh,
black, maybe darker blues, you know what I
Okay.
mean? They don't want, like, Beats are too flashy, you're not
Right.
gonna wear that and have everybody notice you in a professional setting.
Right.
You want something that's more subdued.
Okay, and so, now the example of the ones that you're talking about, like a
Yeah.
proposal that you would bring to the market, what do those headphones look like?
They do, they have different kinds that are, they're either DJ, which they're bigger, like circular and headphones, or they have that are just like, just small over the ears that you can just pretty much walk everywhere with. So they would be more of a professional setting. The only thing that they don't have, which I think would appeal to the US market, is earbuds. If they came in with like a really sleek design earbuds, because a lot of the younger age, like from 23s to 30s, like that. They don't like the over the ear. They want to just have like their phone, plug it in, and you can roll anywhere. You can fit it in a purse or a bag. So I thought that would be more appealing to the US.
Okay, now, so my question would be, current earbuds, what would make those stand out from the earbuds that are on the market now?
That's what I'm saying, like a sleeker design, or if you came out with a design that appealed more to like the ear, because some people, like, you know how headphones have like you have like a regular ear headphone, you have like a rubber at the bottom of it that sticks in your ear. A lot of people get agitated with that. A lot of people don't even like the athletic earbuds where you have to like wrap them over your ear. So I mean, they came out with a design that was pushing more towards the comfortability of the ear. I think that would work.
Okay, all right. So you can see you have to really, so a SWOT analysis of that, right? Of those different types of headphones, the different type of consumer that they appeal to and why, and you start to, you really categorize all that and look at it, and hopefully what falls out at the bottom is this obvious opportunity, this hole in the market that's not currently being met, and your product or product that exists that is not in this market, right, can be brought to that market, and you can demonstrate some success there, right? Okay, excellent. All right. And so once you finish that, you've analyzed the demand side, you've analyzed the supply side, you pretty much wrap it up when you conclude it. Something that's got to be there, it's got to be excellent grammar, language mechanics. That conveys professionalism, right? Not only professionalism, but attention to detail. You know, if something comes across, you know, say it's a a market analysis and it's got grammatical errors, misspellings, things just editing, minor editing is not even done. You know, that shows a lack of attention to detail, which if you extrapolate that to the market, you could say, I bet there's a lot of things this person didn't think about, right? You would just assume that if that was the way something appeared from the beginning. So it's important to not have that. And, you know, really today, there's almost no excuse to let something go through a word processing software, Word or whatever, without using spell check and catching those things. And anytime something is flagged, look at it. Is it right? Does it need to be changed? Or did they think that that was a proper noun when it actually isn't, or whatever it might be. But check all that stuff. Okay. The bottom line is the writing should reflect a successful, serious business person, right? Even if the product you're talking about bringing to the market is designed to appeal to somebody who's not a successful, serious business person, it doesn't matter. So you don't want to get too cutesy with the terminology in there and use a lot of slang. Even though it might seem like for this product, this might work, but for the most part, for most people looking at it, that's not going to be receptive, right? I mean, even if you're talking about, let's get back to Beats, right? LA, even Atlanta, the music scene is dominated by now white collar executives that, they might partner with some people who actually were part of the scene themselves at some time, but they no longer are, right? And they're every bit as technical and analytical as anybody else in corporate America. And so to appeal to that investor crowd or to any other market, it's just got to come across as professional, right? And professional doesn't have to be boring. It's just got to be proper writing and that kind of thing, right? Okay. You want to cite your resources, your statistics. You know, when you make a statement that 37% of people do this, that, or whatever, well, that had to have come from somewhere, right? So how did you arrive at that? Did you get this from the census? Did you know, from what? What exactly is it measuring? That type of thing. You want that in there. So for writing this, reference materials that would be helpful. From Gerber, chapter 21 is the white paper, and that's pretty much where it starts. I think how it is. Actually, you go back to chapter 10, 13, 16, 24. Those are the specific chapters: dream, vision, purpose, mission. And then the MBA for Entrepreneurship, the Portal MBA for Entrepreneurship, the first 3 chapters of that are about, 1 is the entrepreneurial process, 2 is idea generation, and 3 is opportunity recognition, shaping, and reshaping. The market-based management text is about how you would, it's a little bit beyond this stage. This stage of development is more about the market itself and less about how the company itself would be structured in offering this product, right? But some of the purpose, vision, and mission, you can certainly get ideas from market-based management that would be useful in this aspect of it. All right, the other handout is just specifically about demand analysis. So I think we're almost out of time here. We've got probably a few minutes. But it is going to, like for example, demand for any good or service is simply the willingness and ability of consumers to obtain your product for their own use. Various factors of demand would include income, so you could look at the median income of your target market, preferences, that would be the habits and tastes of your target market, the number of consumers, so that's the size of your target market, prices of other goods that would affect your market, are they substitutes, complements for your good, seasonality, the extent to which your market might vary based on time of year, taxes, subsidies, regulations, you know, does that affect your market at all, right? And it really depends what your product or service is. So once you start thinking about your consumer and in the market in this way with all these different things, you know, if you're going to approach a professional crowd and you attach an age range to it, so immediately you've got, you know, how do you define professional? I mean, what is the age range? What would you guys define as professional?
I say 25 to 35.
Okay, so if you're going to target young, emerging professionals, 25 to 35, what is their lifestyle characteristic? What are their habits and preferences? What are they doing with their time away from work, for example, right, on average? And then you start to build a description of this typical consumer. You know, are you talking about college degree, high school educated? If you're assuming college degree, then they're starting at 25. They had just graduated a couple years ago. If they went all the way through, got their MBA or other masters or whatever, maybe they're just out, right? And so young in that sense, probably no children yet, at least in the earlier part, the first half of that segment. Then start thinking about having kids. That's a whole different group. And then when they do have kids, what's the age? And so you're talking about people with kids maybe up to daycare age for the most part. What is their life like, right? And what do they probably think about? And that's from Gerber, that's what he calls the impersonal dream, right? So this is your dream to bring this thing to the market, but in order to make it a success, you have to meet the dream for this particular thing of the consumer, right? And in order to do that, you just have to understand your consumer, right? And that's something that, you know, Steve Jobs said, I don't need to do market research to understand that because I know that my consumer is pretty much like me. That was how he did a lot of his stuff too. He was designing things that he knew he saw the world in a certain way that he could easily see how there were opportunities for all these things, and if he could understand it and see how it would make somebody's life simpler or more enjoyable, he could just see how other people would. And then the difference was he got together a team that brought this thing to the market, right? And he got it to be successful. A unique individual, and in fact, when he was forced out of Apple for 12 years, Apple almost went away as a company, right? He came back to Apple and pretty much rescued it. Says something about leadership in an individual and how important that can be in an organization, right? All right, very good. I'll post a discussion post for Thursday. Again, you can pick up your exams on Thursday in my office.